So some of you probably already know what Wixoss is, but a lot of you don't, so I'm going to explain it to you. Imagine watching the Madoka series, but instead of girls' wishes just getting granted, they actually have to earn their wishes through trials. And the trials just happen to be card games. By the way, before we continue, I know some of you out there are having a heart attack right now because of the way I pronounce the word Wixoss. Right now, the common consensus is that the word is pronounced Wecross. But you know what? Wecross is a stupid name. And after Buddy Fight, I don't want another card game with a stupid name. So I'm gonna call it Wixoss. And as long as you guys know what I'm talking about, hopefully none of you will get on my case about it. And if you do, I don't want to hear it. Oh, anime-wise, the anime's been on for about 4 episodes today at the time of this video being recorded. In the anime, all of the duelists are female, which honestly is kind of genius on the marketing end. Normally, some card game players would pick on other card game players if they found out that the card game they're playing is actually only for females. But because that point is only known in the anime, only people who know stuff about the anime are going to know that the card game is only for females. And none of them are going to care enough to know that, so yeah, it's kind of awesome. And if they do know that, then they're just as nerdy and girly as you are, and don't you forget it. It's kind of funny when you think about it. The card game is marketed specifically towards females, and the demographic for people pre-ordering this are 80% male. As to be expected, but it was a very noble attempt for them to get more females into the card gaming community. Because as of to date, I think I've met like 6 females that play card games. But I digress hardcore. I don't want to do a full review of this anime right now, so I'm just going to explain that it is a very good anime so far. It has a very Madoka vibe, especially when it comes to characters. For example, the main character doesn't actually have a wish, so what she wants to do is just go and lose to everybody else so that their wishes can come true. But it comes up later that people won't be happy with their wishes if people just lose to them on purpose to make them come true, and it's this whole thing. And even her best friend in the anime is wishing to get a guy just like Sayaka did with Madoka. The main character's best friend is actually really fascinating. First of all, because she's the only person whose wish we get to know in the first episode. And second, because, man, how do I put this without putting you guys off of the show forever? In Madoka, Sayaka couldn't be with Kyosuke because she was shy and didn't know how to approach him. They needed to have a different problem here, so instead of that, the problem is that the person she wants to have a relationship is her younger brother. No, wait, stop, don't click off the video. I promise it's a bit deeper and more interesting than I'm making it sound. Just give the anime a shot. Here, I'll give you something that will make you go and watch the anime. You want context? Go watch the anime! But honestly, we're not here to talk about the anime, we're here to talk about the card game. As you may have guessed with this video being released, the card game is being released today. The game is owned by Takara Tomy. The name should sound familiar to you, but probably doesn't. They do own something else you should be quite familiar with. Looking a little more familiar now? And bingo. Despite this fact, I have a very, very high doubt that this game will ever be released in English. So we're just going to have to settle for Japanese cards like we did when Weiss was first released, or hope that Trade Cards Online gets on it. Not to delay the teaching much further, a site called Anime Senshi decided to release an English version of the rules. Link below. Thanks to their efforts, we all know what's going on in the game now, and I can explain it pretty well, so go check them out. This video will be covering 2 things. First, we'll look over the quick start guide and get to know the rules a bit better. Then I'll move on to a Japanese video that the beta testers did showing the game in progress, and I'll explain what's going on. We'll start here at the quick overview of the game. Wixoss is the card game that appears in the anime selector, Wixoss, obviously. The point of the game is to get rid of all of the cards in your opponent's life cloth. It's very, very reminiscent to Kudou and Duel Masters. To be expected. The game is played with two decks, a white deck and a black deck, known as the Lyric deck and the main deck. The black deck, your main deck, has exactly 40 cards in it. Your main deck cards are Signy and Spells. Spells should be pretty obvious by now. They're the cards that normally have one-time use abilities or stay in play, and they give you additional effects. Signy are your attacking cards. They're the cards that you'll be using most of the time to destroy your opponent's life cloth. Your white deck is your Lyric deck. Lyric is the name of your deck's avatar, and this is the deck of the cards special to them. The cards in this deck will be your Lyric level up cards and your arts. You'll be using 10 cards for this deck. Technically, you are allowed to use less than 10 cards, but that gives you no advantage whatsoever. The Lyric deck must include at least one level 0 card, otherwise you couldn't play the game. You can have up to 4 cards with the same name in either deck, and you have to have exactly 20 cards with the Life Burst ability in your main deck. Life Burst is this game's version of Shield Trigger. When a card from your life cloth is destroyed, you flip it over to see if it has Life Burst symbol. If it has the Life Burst symbol, then you can activate the card before it's sent away. Setting up the game looks a little something like this. First, take one of the level 0 Lyrics from your Lyric deck and put it face down in the Lyric zone. Makes sense? The guide says you should play rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first, but most people will probably roll dice. Draw 5 cards from your main deck to make up your opening hand. If you don't like any of the cards in your opening hand, you can put them back in the deck, shuffle, and then draw the same number of cards, but you can only do this one time. When you're happy with your hand, you can take 7 cards from the top of your main deck and put them face down in your life cloth. The game plays with 7 blocking cards as opposed to Duel Masters' 5 shields, so the games last a little bit longer. Once all of that's set up, both players flip over their beginning Lyric and begin the game. There are 4 types of cards in Wixoss. First, we're going to look at the most important one, the Lyric. Luckily, there are bullet points here, so I'm going to use those to explain what's going on. At number 1, we have the name of the current Lyric card. This will most likely have the name of the character featured on the card, as long as what their title is at this level. You can't quite see it here, but at bullet point 2, it actually tells you what kind of card the card is right above the level. At 3, we can see what color the card is. The colors include white, red, black, blue, and green, along with colorless. At 4, we have the character's effect text. This character doesn't have any effect text, but if it did have effects, then this is where they'd be. At 5, we have the Lyric's level. Lyrics start at level 0 and gradually go up by 1 every turn. Point 7 has the Lyric's grow cost. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but bear with me. In order to level up using this card, you have to get rid of 2 white cards, because it's the symbol for white along with the number 2. These cards are paid from your Enter Zone, which is something I'll talk about later. At point 8, we have this character's level limit. All Signy in the game have some sort of level. This number tells you what the level of all of your combined Signy are allowed to have on the board. This Lyric's limit is 8, and there are 3 spaces on the board, so that means the character levels of all of the characters in those 3 spaces have to equal 8. That could be something like 2 level 4s, or 2 level 3s and a level 2. You could also have lower than that, but never higher. Finally, point 9 is our Lyric type. It normally tells us which character chain the Lyric card is a part of, but sometimes also includes the cost of playing the Lyric card or special conditions. In this case, it's just telling us that this card is the 3rd level of the Tama chain, Tama being this character's name in the anime. This may not seem that important at first, but as new sets come out, we can expect to see new Lyrics. The other card in your white deck is Arts. Arts are like special skills that your Lyric can use. At point 1, we have the card's name, at point 2, we have the card's type, which is art, and at point 3, we have the card's color again. At point 4, we have effects again, but this time the card actually has effect text. The cards haven't been translated yet, so I can't tell you what it says, but I bet it's awesome! These cards can also explain what bullet point 6 is, since we didn't get to see it with Lyrics. Spells and arts have some kind of cost that you have to pay, and this is just explaining the cost of this card. This art requires that you pay 3 white. I know I haven't quite explained what you have to pay with yet, but trust me, I'm getting there. Signi are your attacking cards. They're like spirits that help your Larig out. As usual, at points 1, 2, and 3 we have the card's name, type, and color. Some Signi have special effects, like this one, and that effect text is put in space 4. Again, we don't know what the card does quite yet, but we're getting there. I'll also explain what that red symbol means, so don't get impatient. At 5 we have this Signi's level, it's level 4. So if we were using the Larig from before and we played this card, then we would have 4 spaces left, since our Tama has a field limit of 8 and this takes up 4 of those spaces. If our Larig didn't have 4 spaces, this character would be too powerful for them to handle, so we couldn't play it anyway. Some Signi only work under specific Larigs or Larigs of specific types, and it tells you that on bullet point 10. At 11 we have the Signi's class, which I guess is going to come into play a little later. At point 12 we have this Signi's power. Just as a reference note, 12,000 is really good. And finally, at space 13 we have the Life Burst symbol, which you might remember me talking about earlier. If this card started the game in our life cloth and it got destroyed, then we could actually activate this card's ability before sending it off. It also means if we already have 20 cards with Life Burst in our deck, then we can't include this one because that would put us at 21. Last main deck card are spells. 1, 2, and 3 are card name, card type, and card color. 4 is the effect of the spell when you play it. And 6 is the card's cost. This card, for example, costs 1 white. The ability icons are color-coded, which is so awesome. Red means continuous, that effect is active until something stops it. Blue is startup, it's only activated 1 time when the card is played. And green is action. As long as you can pay the cost, you can do it as many times as you like during your main phase. It doesn't even specify that it's during your main phase. It could be something that works during your opponent's main phase. The shield icon means it can be used to guard, but we haven't talked about guarding yet. And we've already gone over Life Burst. This next section explains how to pay costs. You have a space called an inner zone, and I'll explain how to fill your inner zone later. In order to play cards that have a cost, that's what you have to get rid of. There are 2 examples shown. In order to grow the blue Larig, you have to give up 1 card from your inner zone. So to grow, just put 1 blue card from your inner zone into the trash. When you play this card, you can also get rid of 1 blue card from your inner zone to use an activated ability. Remember, the blue symbol means startup, so you can only use this effect 1 time when the card is played. The arrow on top of the card means to down. Downing is the same as tapping in other card games. It means you have to turn the card sideways in order to use the effect. Here's a little example showing it in action. In this game, tapped and untapped is referred to as up and down. Each arts card will have a specific phase in which you can use it, and it'll indicate the time you can use it on the card. If it says main phase, then you can use it during your main phase, and if it says attack phase, you can use it during either player's attack phase. If it's a spell cut-in, then you can use it in response to when your opponent uses a spell. You should understand the cards pretty well, so let's go over a turn. First is your up phase. Turn any of your downed cards back to up position. Unlike most card games, during the draw phase of this card game, you draw 2 cards instead of 1. The exception is when you're going first. The player who goes first only draws 1 card during their first turn. The interface should look a little bit familiar if you got into Buddy Fight. You can select 1 card from your hand and put it in your inner zone to charge up. You can also choose to move one of your in-play Signi into the inner zone instead. This will free up your field so that you can play higher level Signi or better Signi. You can also choose to do neither of these. Keep in mind though that unlike Buddy Fight, you do not get to draw a card. This is specifically for charging your inner zone. Next is the grow phase, which is kind of like the ride phase if you remember playing Vanguard. During this phase, you can take 1 card from your Larig deck and put it on top of your current Larig. If you're trying to get to a higher level, then you can only level up 1 point higher than the current Larig's level. However, if for some reason you want to use a lower level Larig or the same level Larig, you are definitely welcome to do that too. You can't grow Larig with a card of a different type. For example, you couldn't use a red card to level up a green card, you know what I'm saying? During your main phase, you can do the following things as many times as you like. You can play Signi equal to or lower than your current Larig's level, so if you have a level 2, for example, you can play level 2s, level 1s, and level 0s. Keep in mind your Larig's levels cannot go past your current Larig's limit. For example, if you have the level 3 from earlier, then you can play level 3s, level 2s, and level 1s like 3-2-1, 3-2-2, 2-2-2, so on and so forth. But never 3-3-3 because that would put you over your limit of 8. You can play spells, arts, signy, or Lyrig powers. The unique thing about your Lyrig deck is it's kind of like a second hand. You can look through it and see if there's an art you need and use it. You're also welcome to just use cards from your hand or your current Lyrig's powers. And finally, you can trash your current in-play Signy to play more powerful ones. Or just to clear up your field. Whatever the reason, you can put your Signy from in-play into the trash at no penalty. When you're done with all of that, we move on to the attack phase, which is a little wordy, so we'll go through it slow. The first thing that happens when you declare the attack step is players play arts that have to deal with the attack step. If an arts card can be performed during the attack step, then it'll say it on the card. Also keep in mind that the first player cannot attack. At least not during the very first turn. If you have any in-play Signy, then they get to attack first. First you need to see if your opponent has an in-play Signy directly in front of yours. Signy only fight the space in front of them. Luckily, the game of Wixoss is quite forgiving. If your Signy's power is equal to or lower than the Signy that it's fighting, then both of them stay in play. Normally, if you use a card to attack into a card stronger than it, then your monster's destroyed, but in Wixoss it's a little different. We'll have to see how that goes. If your Signy has more power than your opponent's, though, the monster is banished. A fancy way of saying destroyed. If your opponent doesn't have a Signy in front of yours, then you're attacking their life cloth. If you're attacking when your opponent doesn't have any life cloth left, then good job, you win. If your opponent does have any cards in their life cloth and one of them is crashed, check it to see if it has a life burst symbol and then put it in the inner zone. If it didn't have a life burst symbol, then it just goes to the inner zone like normal, but if it did have a life burst symbol, then your opponent can use the effect and then put it in the inner zone. Signy attacks resolve one at a time, so attack with everyone before you move on. When you're done attacking with Signy, it's time to attack with your Lyrig. Your Lyrig always deals life cloth damage. The same rule applies. If your opponent doesn't have any life cloth when you attack with your Lyrig, then you win the game. Your opponent can stop this, however, by discarding a card from their hand that has guard. Guarding can only be used against Lyrig attack and only by specific cards that have the shield symbol on the bottom. After your Lyrig attacks, your attack phase is over and we move on to the end phase. Any effects that say this turn or before the end of the turn or until the end of the turn end as soon as the end phase hits. If you have 7 or more cards in your hand, you have to discard until you only have 6. 6 is the maximum hand size in this game. When you're done with this, it's your opponent's turn. That's an overview of the rules, and I do hope I helped you understand them. As a special treat, Takara Tomy released a video showing 2 people playing the game, and I'm going to go over that video now and kind of go over what's going on.